The Galactic Academy was buzzing with excitement. Aliens from all over the galaxy had gathered for an important event. The atmosphere was tense as everyone waited for the famous Dr. Knox to speak. Dr. Knox was one of the most respected scientists in the galaxy. He was a tall, gray-skinned alien with 4 eyes that seemed to see everything. His voice was calm, but when he spoke, everyone listened. Today, Dr. Knox was going to make a big announcement. A challenge, one that no one could ignore. Standing at the front of the grand hall, Dr. Knox looked out at the crowd. His sharp eyes scanned the room, where beings of all shapes and sizes sat in their seats, waiting for him to speak. Humans, who were new to space travel, were seated in the back. Some of the most advanced species from the galaxy sat closer to the stage. They all had one thing in common. They all wanted to prove themselves. They all wanted to show that their species was the best. Dr. Knox smiled, a hint of arrogance in his expression. For centuries, many species have tried to solve the star energy puzzle, he began. His voice echoed through the hall, smooth and clear. A puzzle that has confounded the greatest minds of the galaxy. A puzzle so difficult that it has been called unsolvable. The audience was silent. The star energy puzzle was one of the most famous challenges in the galaxy. It was about finding a way to use the power of entire stars. The puzzle involved strange equations, star maps, and energy patterns that no one could figure out. Many had tried, but no one had succeeded. Dr. Knox paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. He could feel the tension in the air. The audience hung on every word. He took a deep breath and continued. I'm here to tell you that no species, no matter how advanced, will ever solve this puzzle. It is beyond us. It is simply too difficult. There is no solution, and no one will ever find one. A murmur spread through the crowd. Some of the aliens looked uncomfortable, while others whispered to one another. They didn't know what to make of Dr. Knox's bold statement. Could it really be true? Could the greatest minds in the galaxy really be so helpless? The challenge of solving the star energy puzzle had become a kind of game, a test of intelligence that no one was willing to give up on. But now, here was Dr. Knox, telling them all that it was impossible. He smiled again, clearly enjoying the reactions of the crowd. Some of you may disagree, he said, but I challenge you to prove me wrong. If any species can solve the star energy puzzle, I will gladly admit I was wrong. But I have no doubt in my mind that no one will succeed. The crowd was still. And then, as if on cue, the doors at the back of the hall opened. A human walked in. It was James Carter, a young man from Earth who had recently joined the Academy. He was dressed simply, in a plain suit that made him stand out among the alien visitors who wore colorful robes and shining armor. His eyes were focused, determined, but not with the arrogance that Dr. Knox had shown. Carter had heard about the star energy puzzle, and he was here to learn more. He didn't expect to solve it, but he knew there was always something to learn from a challenge. As Carter walked down the aisle, the audience stared. Humans were still a relatively new species to the Academy. They had only recently made their way into space, and most other species thought of them as primitive. The aliens had little respect for humans, and many didn't believe they could achieve much in the world of galactic science and technology. But James Carter was different. He didn't walk in with grand plans or high expectations. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He simply wanted to understand the puzzle. To him, it wasn't about showing off. It was about finding the answers to the universe's biggest mysteries. He took a seat in the back, where he could observe without drawing too much attention to himself. Dr. Knox noticed Carter's arrival. He frowned slightly. Humans, what did they know about the star energy puzzle? They didn't even have the advanced technology that the other species had. Yet Dr. Knox had heard that humans were curious and creative, qualities that might just make them dangerous in ways no one expected. Ah, a human, Dr. Knox said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Perhaps you think you can solve the puzzle. Perhaps you have some new idea that the rest of us haven't thought of. The audience chuckled. Carter didn't respond. He simply smiled and sat quietly, observing Dr. Knox and the other alien species. He had heard the professor's challenge, but he wasn't here to argue. He was here to learn. And maybe, just maybe, he would find something that the others had missed. Dr. Knox's words hung in the air, a bold declaration that no one could escape. The challenge had been thrown. The question now was, could anyone prove him wrong? James Carter sat quietly at the back of the grand hall, listening to the whispers around him. He could feel the eyes of the other species on him, sizing him up. He didn't mind. He wasn't here to prove anything. He wasn't here to fight for respect. All Carter wanted was to understand. He had heard about the star energy puzzle, and something about it intrigued him. There had to be a way to solve it. He wasn't sure how, but he was determined to try. While the aliens continued to whisper, Carter kept his focus. His thoughts raced. The puzzle had baffled the best minds in the galaxy, yet he had this feeling, this strong sense, that maybe the answer was simpler than they thought. Maybe the answer wasn't about more advanced technology or more complicated equations. Maybe it was about seeing the puzzle in a completely new way. That's what he was here to find out. The Academy's main hall was filled with alien scientists and engineers, all of whom had their own unique ways of thinking. Some of them had brains that could process information faster than any computer, while others could manipulate energy in ways that seemed like magic. Yet, all of them had failed to solve the puzzle. Their high-tech equipment and powerful minds had led them nowhere. Carter knew it wasn't about being the smartest or having the best tools. It was about understanding the puzzle from a different angle. The room suddenly became quiet as Dr. Knox walked to the front again. He looked around, clearly enjoying the attention. The professor's eyes scanned the room, stopping when he saw Carter sitting in the back. A small smirk crossed his face. Carter wasn't surprised. He had expected Dr. Knox to notice him. The human had been the subject of much discussion in the Academy since his arrival. Many aliens saw humans as primitive, barely able to grasp basic science. They didn't believe a species that could barely travel the stars would ever solve a puzzle this complex. "Well, it seems we have a human among us," Dr. Knox said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I wonder, Mr. Carter, do you have any bright ideas on how to solve the star energy puzzle?" Carter didn't flinch. He didn't respond right away. But when he did, his voice was calm and steady. "I'm not here to compete with anyone, Dr. Knox. I'm here to learn. To understand how you all think. Maybe the puzzle isn't about having the biggest brain or the most powerful machines. Maybe it's about seeing things from a different perspective." The room fell silent. The aliens around him looked at Carter, not sure how to take his words. They were used to arrogance, to boasting, but Carter was different. He wasn't claiming to be better. He wasn't saying that he had all the answers. He was just offering a simple thought. It was strange to them. But it was also a little refreshing. Dr. Knox raised an eyebrow. "A different perspective, you say? Well, I'm curious, Mr. Carter. What makes you think you can see things differently than the rest of us? After all, you humans are so new to the galaxy." Carter stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving Dr. Knox. "We might be new to space, but that doesn't mean we don't have something valuable to offer. We have our own way of thinking, our own approach to problems. Maybe the galaxy's smartest minds have been too focused on their own way of doing things. Maybe it's time for a change." A few aliens chuckled, but Carter didn't let it bother him. He wasn't here to fight anyone. He was here to solve the puzzle, even if it meant going against the grain. He took a deep breath and continued, "I may not have all the answers, but I believe I can find a way to solve it. I just need to study the puzzle. I need to understand it better, step by step. I think if I keep looking at it, I'll see something no one else has seen." Dr. Knox studied Carter for a moment, then shook his head. "You're wasting your time, human. This puzzle is far beyond you. But if you're so sure of yourself, I welcome you to try. Just know that no one has ever cracked it, and no one ever will." Carter smiled, but there was no arrogance in his expression. just a quiet confidence. I'll be sure to keep that in mind, Dr. Knox. With that, Carter left the hall, his mind focused on the puzzle ahead. He wasn't sure how he was going to solve it, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to give up. He was going to figure it out, one step at a time. As he walked down the long, shining hallway of the academy, Carter couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. He wasn't intimidated by the alien species around him. He wasn't worried about what they thought of him. All that mattered was the puzzle. All that mattered was finding the solution. Carter knew that if he looked at it long enough, if he stayed patient and kept thinking in new ways, he could find the answer. The other species had failed because they couldn't see the puzzle from a different perspective. But humans were good at thinking outside the box. Carter was ready to prove that, no matter what Dr. Knox or anyone else believed. James Carter stood in front of the giant screen in the Academy's research hall. The room was quiet, with only the soft hum of the computers breaking the silence. He could feel the weight of the star energy puzzle pressing down on him. For weeks, he had studied the pieces, trying to understand its strange patterns and confusing numbers. Now, it was time to face it head-on. On the screen, the puzzle appeared, a swirling mass of stars, equations, and energy graphs. It was like a maze with no clear way out. Every alien species in the galaxy had tried to solve it, but they all had failed. The puzzle was said to be unsolvable. No one could ever make sense of it. And yet Carter was determined to prove that it could be done. The pieces were there, he could feel it. He just had to figure out how they all fit together. Carter took a deep breath and sat down at the control panel. The room was empty, just him and the massive screen in front of him. There was no one watching, no one to judge him if he failed. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Carter felt free. Free to think, free to make mistakes, and free to try new things. The other species might have their advanced technology and superior brains, but Carter had something they didn't: his ability to look at things from a different angle. He started by examining the equations on the screen. They were complex, made up of symbols and numbers that meant nothing to him at first glance. It was like looking at a language he didn't understand. The other aliens had spent years studying these equations, trying to find some hidden meaning. Some thought it was about energy fields. Others believed it had something to do with gravity. But none of them had succeeded. Carter knew he had to start simple. He couldn't get lost in the complexity of the equations. The answer had to be there, hidden in plain sight. He zoomed in on one section of the puzzle. It was a small part, almost unnoticed by the other researchers, but something about it caught his eye. A small pattern, a tiny connection that others had missed. He focused all his attention on it, studying it closely. The more he looked, the more it seemed to make sense. It was like a key hidden in the middle of the mess. He began to write notes, scribbling down his thoughts as fast as they came to him. The pieces were starting to fit together. For hours, Carter worked in silence, ignoring the passing time. His fingers moved across the control panel, adjusting the data, running simulations, and testing different theories. Each time he thought he had found the solution, the puzzle seemed to slip away. But Carter didn't give up. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to stop now. As the sun began to set outside, Carter's eyes grew tired, but his mind was sharper than ever. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment, letting his mind rest. He wasn't giving up, but maybe he just needed a new approach. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the distant stars. He thought about all the times humans had been told they couldn't do something, only to prove the world wrong. This puzzle was no different. He turned back to the screen and started again. This time, instead of focusing on the equations, he thought about the puzzle's bigger picture. What if the answer wasn't in the numbers at all? What if the key to solving the puzzle was something much simpler, like the way energy flowed through stars, the way light and heat radiated outward? He started to look at the puzzle like a map of a star itself, not just a jumble of numbers. Slowly, the answer began to form in his mind. The puzzle wasn't about the equations. It was about the star's energy, how it could be captured and harnessed. Carter's heart raced as he began to put his idea into motion. He started to adjust the data, rerun the simulations, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, something clicked. The solution was so simple, yet so powerful. It was the design of a machine, a giant structure that could capture the full energy of a star, a machine that would harness the power of the sun itself. Carter's hands trembled as he finalized the design. The Dyson sphere. The answer had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. He had been thinking too much about the numbers and equations, but the real answer was in understanding the natural flow of energy. Carter stood up, staring at the screen in disbelief. He had done it. He had solved the star energy puzzle. For a moment, he couldn't believe it. His mind had raced for so long, and now, here it was, the solution, the first step to harnessing the energy of stars. But Carter didn't celebrate yet. This was only the beginning. The real challenge would be building the Dyson sphere, testing it, and proving that it could work. He knew the galaxy wouldn't believe it until they saw it. But Carter was ready. He had faced the puzzle, and he had won. As he sat back down, a quiet sense of satisfaction washed over him. The room was still empty, the silence thick around him. But Carter didn't feel alone. He felt like he had just taken the first step in changing the future. And that was enough. The halls of the Galactic Academy were filled with whispers. Aliens from across the galaxy had gathered, each one waiting to hear what James Carter, the human, had to say. After his bold claim that he had solved the star energy puzzle, the excitement was palpable. No one could believe it. Humans were new to space, and the puzzle had baffled the brightest minds for centuries. Yet here was Carter, claiming he had found a solution. Carter stood in front of the giant screen, his hands resting on the control panel. He had been working for days, preparing to present his idea to the Academy. His heart was pounding. The aliens in the room were watching him closely, waiting for him to prove himself. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carter began, his voice calm but filled with determination. "I believe I've solved the star energy puzzle. The solution isn't as complicated as you might think. It's simple, really." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some aliens shook their heads in disbelief, while others leaned forward, eager to hear more. Carter took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He had already done the work. Now, it was time to show them what he had discovered. "I've designed a structure, a machine, that can capture the energy of a star. We've been looking at the wrong thing all this time." The solution wasn't in the equations. It wasn't about manipulating energy fields or gravity. It was about harnessing the energy of the star itself in the simplest way possible. Carter pressed a button on the control panel, and the screen lit up with a bright, glowing image. It was a model, simple and sleek, a sphere surrounding a star, capturing its energy. It was the Dyson sphere, something that had been theorized for centuries but never attempted. The concept was straightforward. A giant shell built around a star, collecting its energy and making it usable for entire civilizations. But no one had ever built one. No one had ever even tried. Until now. "This," Carter continued, pointing at the image on the screen, "is the Dyson sphere. It is the answer to the star energy puzzle. We've all been thinking too complexly about it. The energy of a star is immense, and if we can collect it, we can solve the galaxy's energy problems for good. The technology to build it is possible. We just need to take the first step." The room was silent. No one spoke. Some aliens looked at each other, unsure of what to think. Others stared at the screen, trying to understand what Carter was saying. The Dyson sphere seemed too simple, too basic. Surely something so important couldn't be solved with such an idea. Dr. Knox, the Academy's lead professor, stepped forward. His expression was unreadable, but there was a spark of curiosity in his eyes. "You believe this will work, human?" he asked, his voice cold but with a hint of interest. Carter nodded. "I do. The energy of a star is far greater than we've ever imagined. We've been focusing on complex systems, trying to find energy inside the star itself. But the solution is simpler. Build the sphere, capture the energy, and we can use it. Dr. Knox studied the image closely. The Dyson sphere was a simple idea, yet it was one that had never been put into practice. It had always been considered too impossible, too dangerous. Could a human truly make it work? Carter could see the doubt in the eyes of the alien professor. But he also saw something else: curiosity. Dr. Knox wasn't dismissing him outright. The scientist was thinking, analyzing the idea. Carter smiled, but he didn't say anything. He knew that he had to show them. Words alone wouldn't be enough. "I know it sounds simple," Carter said, "but sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to use the tools we already have in a new way. The Dyson sphere will provide unlimited energy. It will change everything. And it's possible. We just have to believe that it can be done." The audience was still, everyone in the room deep in thought. Some of the more advanced species were skeptical, but even they couldn't deny the simplicity of Carter's idea. It was something they hadn't thought of, something they hadn't tried. For a moment, Dr. Knox said nothing. He simply stared at the screen, his mind working. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "This is unorthodox," Dr. Knox admitted, his voice softer now. "But perhaps it's time we considered something simpler. We've been so focused on complexity that we forgot to look at the basics. Your idea is simple, and maybe, just maybe, that's what we've been missing." Carter felt a surge of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The aliens were beginning to see what he saw: a new way forward. The Dyson sphere was no longer just a theory. It was a real possibility. The next step was to prove it. "I know it can work," Carter said, his voice full of confidence. "Now, we just need to build it." The room was still, but now there was a shift in the atmosphere. The other species in the academy weren't laughing or doubting. They were listening. They were thinking. Carter had done what no one thought possible. He had shown them that a simple idea could change everything. And with that, the journey to build the Dyson sphere began. The next day at the Galactic Academy was unlike any other. The news of Carter's Dyson sphere idea had spread quickly, and now the halls buzzed with excitement and disbelief. Aliens from all over the galaxy gathered to hear more about the humans' bold claim. Most of them were still skeptical, but some were curious. Was it possible? Could a simple idea like the Dyson sphere really work? James Carter stood before the Academy's main council, the most powerful group of alien scientists and engineers in the galaxy. Their eyes were all on him. Some looked at him with suspicion, others with interest, but none of them looked convinced. He had shown them his design. He had presented his case, but now it was time to prove that his idea could work. Carter wasn't nervous, though. He had been through worse. He had faced challenges before, and he had always found a way through. This time was no different. The Dyson sphere might have seemed like a crazy idea to them, but Carter believed in it. He knew it could change everything. "Mr. Carter," said an alien with bright green skin and large round eyes, "we have reviewed your design, and we still fail to see how a human can build such a thing. The technology needed is beyond your species' capabilities." The alien's words echoed through the room, and many nodded in agreement. Carter's heart sank for a moment, but he didn't let their doubt get to him. He had expected this. He had known they wouldn't believe him at first. "I understand your concerns," Carter replied, standing tall. "But I believe we can do it. We may not have the technology yet, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. The Dyson sphere is not just a dream. It's a challenge, and humans are good at facing challenges." The council members exchanged glances. Some were clearly unconvinced, while others seemed to be thinking it over. Carter could feel their skepticism weighing on him, but he pushed through it. He knew that if he could just show them that the Dyson sphere was possible, they would come around. I have already started working on the first steps, Carter continued. I've built a small-scale model of the Dyson sphere using the technology we already have. It's not perfect, but it's a start. We can improve it over time. But the important thing is that it's possible. We just need to believe in it. The room fell silent. No one spoke. Carter could see the doubt in their eyes, but he also saw something else, a flicker of curiosity. Some of them were beginning to see the logic in his words. Maybe, just maybe, the Dyson sphere wasn't as impossible as they thought. Suddenly, a loud voice interrupted the silence. It was Dr. Knox, the lead professor of the academy. He had been quiet for most of the meeting, but now he stepped forward. "Enough," Dr. Knox said, his voice firm. "You say this idea is possible, human, but you've done nothing to show us that it can work. You can talk all day about belief and hope, but what we need is proof. Proof that the Dyson sphere is more than just an idea." Carter took a deep breath. He had been expecting this moment. He had known that Dr. Knox wouldn't be satisfied with just words. But now it was time to show him. Carter motioned to the side of the room, where a large screen stood. "I have something to show you," Carter said. "A demonstration." With a press of a button, the screen flickered to life. A holographic projection appeared, showing the small-scale model of the Dyson sphere he had been working on. It was simple but impressive. The hologram displayed a spherical shell floating around a small star, with energy beams collecting its power. "This is just a prototype," Carter explained, "but it works. I've already tested it on a smaller scale. The energy of the star is captured and stored in the sphere. We can then use that energy to power entire planets. And the best part is, this is just the beginning. Once we have the technology and resources, we can build it on a larger scale." The council watched in stunned silence. For the first time, they were seeing the Dyson sphere in action. It wasn't a theory anymore. It was real. The energy from the star was being collected and transferred. It was simple, elegant, and powerful. Dr. Knox's face remained expressionless, but Carter could see the change in his eyes. He wasn't laughing now. He wasn't dismissing the idea. For the first time, he was considering it. Considering that Carter might actually be right. "Impressive," Dr. Knox finally said. "I still have my doubts, but I cannot deny that this is something new. It may not be perfect, but it is a start." Carter nodded. "Thank you, Dr. Knox. I know it's not perfect, but it's a step forward. And that's all we need right now." The room was still, but the atmosphere had changed. The doubt was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Hope, curiosity, and maybe, just maybe, belief. Carter had done what no one thought was possible. He had shown them that the Dyson sphere wasn't just a dream. It was a reality waiting to be built. As the meeting came to an end, Carter felt a sense of relief wash over him. The Academy hadn't fully accepted the Dyson sphere idea, but they were no longer dismissing it either. It was a start, and that was all he needed. The hard part was over. Now, it was time to take the next step. The days after the Academy's meeting were a whirlwind for James Carter. The Dyson sphere idea was no longer just a theory. It was a real project, a dream that was beginning to take shape. The Academy had given him the green light to proceed, but they had also made it clear they would not make this easy for him. The galaxy's brightest minds were now watching every move he made. Carter wasn't just building a machine. He was building a new future for the entire galaxy. Carter stood on the construction site, looking out at the massive empty space before him. The work would be monumental, but he was ready. He wasn't alone in this anymore. The Academy had provided the resources, and alien engineers from across the galaxy had joined his team. The project had become bigger than he had ever imagined. But for Carter, this was still just the beginning. "Ready to begin, Carter?" asked Dr. Knox, who had become one of the project's most critical advisors. He stood beside Carter, a look of curiosity in his eyes. He still wasn't fully convinced, But even Dr. Knox couldn't ignore the fact that they were about to do something no one had ever attempted before. Carter nodded, his mind focused. "We have a lot to do, but I believe we're ready." The team had started with the basics. They had to design the framework for the Dyson sphere, something strong enough to hold the energy of a star. It wasn't going to be easy, but Carter had an advantage. The simple, clear idea behind it. It didn't need to be complicated. It just needed to work. For days, Carter and his team worked nonstop. They built the framework for the Dyson sphere, piece by piece. Aliens from different species brought their advanced technologies to the table, combining them with Carter's ideas. Each day, the structure grew larger. And each day, the team faced new challenges. But Carter had learned long ago that challenges were just obstacles to be overcome. With every problem they faced, he found a solution. It was a long and exhausting process. The Academy's engineers worked in shifts, barely stopping for sleep or food. Carter was no different. He couldn't afford to stop now. The Dyson sphere was more than just a machine. It was hope. It was the answer to the galaxy's energy problems. And it was his responsibility to make it happen. Finally, after weeks of tireless work, the first section of the Dyson sphere was complete. It wasn't much, a small partial shell, but it was a start. Carter stood back and stared at it, his heart swelling with pride. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The dream was no longer just a theory. It was something tangible. "We're not done yet," Carter said to his team, his voice full of determination. "This is just the beginning. We've taken the first step, but we have a long way to go." The team nodded, understanding the gravity of what they were building. They weren't just constructing a machine. They were changing the course of history. The Dyson sphere would provide endless energy, enough to power entire planets. It could save the galaxy from energy shortages and environmental destruction. The dream wasn't just about technology. It was about the future. Days turned into weeks, and the Dyson sphere began to take shape. The framework grew larger, more intricate. Carter's team faced many obstacles, but they overcame every one. The project was no longer just a challenge. It was a race against time. The galaxy's future depended on their success. But as the sphere grew, so did the pressure. The galaxy's leaders were watching closely. Some were still doubtful, while others were eager to see the results. They had invested millions of credits into the project. Carter couldn't afford to fail. One evening, as Carter reviewed the plans for the next stage, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Dr. Knox. "You've done something incredible, Carter," Dr. Knox said, his voice low but filled with respect. "I never thought I'd see the day when we actually built something like this. You've proven that humans can do more than anyone thought." Carter smiled, though his exhaustion was clear. "We've still got a long way to go. The Dyson sphere isn't finished yet, but we're getting closer." Dr. Knox nodded. "I know, and I'm starting to believe that it will work." The next day, Carter and his team were ready to test the first energy transfer. They would capture the energy of a small star, directing it into the framework of the Dyson sphere. It was a risky move, but Carter had confidence in his design. If they succeeded, it would be the first step toward the full-scale Dyson sphere, the one that could power an entire galaxy. The moment the energy began to flow into the sphere, everyone held their breath. Would it work? Could they really harness the power of a star? For a few tense seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the sphere began to glow. The energy was being collected. The room erupted into cheers. Carter couldn't believe it. They had done it. The Dyson sphere was working. The dream was no longer a dream. It was a reality. And it was only the beginning. The Dyson sphere was working. The first test had been a success, but Carter and his team knew this was just the beginning. They had captured a small amount of energy from a star, but now the real work would begin. It was time to build the full-scale Dyson sphere, one that could provide power to entire planets, to entire civilizations. Carter stood in the command center, staring at the holographic map of the Dyson sphere. The first shell was complete, and energy was flowing. But they needed more. The sphere had to grow, bigger and stronger, to hold the energy of the stars it was meant to collect. It wasn't going to be easy, but Carter was determined. "We've come this far," Carter said to his team. "Now we need to finish what we started. Let's make this work." The team went back to work, this time with a new sense of urgency. They had proven that the Dyson sphere could capture energy, but they still had to build the structure on a much larger scale. Weeks passed, and the sphere slowly grew, piece by piece. The technology was advanced, and the construction process was unlike anything Carter had ever seen. They were building something far beyond what humans had ever created. It was hard work, and not without setbacks. There were moments when Carter doubted they could finish. But with each challenge, they found a way to push forward. The Academy's engineers worked day and night, testing and refining. It wasn't just a machine they were building. It was the future of the galaxy. The pressure was heavy, but Carter didn't let it stop him. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. Carter was working late in the lab, looking over the latest energy data from the Dyson sphere, when a soft chime from the console caught his attention. The energy readings were spiking. The sphere was drawing in far more power than they had expected. Something was wrong. Carter quickly called Dr. Knox and the other engineers to the command center. They all stared at the readings in confusion. The sphere was absorbing more energy than they had planned. It was growing faster than they had anticipated. "What's happening?" Dr. Knox asked, his voice filled with concern. "Why is the energy flow increasing like this?" Carter didn't know, but he could feel the tension building. He had to find out. The last thing they needed was a catastrophic failure. As the team scrambled to analyze the data, Carter stood still, his mind racing. Then, he noticed something. The energy wasn't just coming from the star they had connected the sphere to. It was coming from somewhere else, a source outside their known system. This isn't right," Carter said, pointing at the readings. "The energy is coming from beyond the star. It's as if the sphere is pulling energy from a different place." The room fell silent. The engineers looked at each other, unsure of what to say. They had designed the sphere to capture energy from a star, but this was something else, something they hadn't planned for. Dr. Knox stepped forward, his face pale. "Are you suggesting the sphere is pulling energy from another dimension?" Carter didn't know, but the idea made sense. The Dyson sphere was meant to be a device to collect vast amounts of energy, but this was different. It wasn't just collecting energy. It was connecting to something far greater than a single star. It was tapping into a power that no one had expected, a power that might be beyond their control. "I think we need to investigate this," Carter said, his voice steady despite the unease he felt. "We have to know where this energy is coming from." The team worked through the night, scanning every inch of data they could find. The energy signatures were unlike anything they had ever seen. It wasn't just a new form of energy. It was something new entirely, something that no one had even imagined. Finally, after hours of intense work, they made a discovery. The Dyson sphere wasn't just capturing energy from a star. It was opening a gateway, a portal to another dimension, another source of infinite energy. The sphere had become more than just a machine. It had become a bridge between their galaxy and something far more powerful. Carter couldn't believe what he was seeing. They had stumbled upon something incredible, something that could change everything. The Dyson sphere was not just an answer to the galaxy's energy problems. It was the key to a new frontier, a frontier they had never even known existed. "Do you realize what this means?" Carter said, his voice full of awe. "We've discovered a way to tap into unlimited energy, energy from another dimension. This could solve the energy crisis for every civilization in the galaxy." But as the team stared at the data, they knew there was something else they had to consider. The power they had uncovered was vast, and they had no idea what it might do. Could they control it? Could they use it without destroying everything? Dr. Knox looked at Carter, his face full of wonder and fear. This is beyond anything we've ever done. We need to be careful. Carter nodded. The Dyson sphere had opened a door to something far greater than they had ever imagined. But with that discovery came a new responsibility. They had to understand what they had found. They had to learn to control it, or risk unleashing something they couldn't stop. The dream had become something much bigger. It wasn't just about energy anymore. It was about the future of the galaxy and the unknown dangers that lay beyond it.